I would like to welcome Flo and hand over to Flo from Network of Wellbeing to kick us off with today's session.
Thanks so much, Jana, and hi everyone. Lovely to see the hellos coming into the chat and see where people are joining from today. So like Jana kindly introduced, I'm from an organisation called the Network of Wellbeing, which I'll share a little bit more about shortly. And I'm also a mindfulness practitioner. I really have been practicing mindfulness for about 6 or 7 years, and I really value what it offers me in my own life in terms of helping me to rest and reflect, as is the topic we're focusing on today, and really deal with those times where there might be a lot going on for you, to just kind of help slow down and be in the moment. So I'm just going to try and introduce some of those techniques today, but this is hopefully going to be a really interactive session where we can practice some things, get to know each other, share with each other as well. But to start with, I just thought I'd guide a very brief mindfulness practice to help us land in this space, this online space together. Like Jana says, it can be very different from being together in person, but it can be nice to try and create that sense that we're really present with each other and that we've chosen to take this time out and spend some time together practicing and learning about mindfulness. So I'll invite you to just get yourself into a kind of comfortable position. I'm going to do the same. And just know that in the next just few minutes, we're just going to focus our attention a bit on our inner world. So whether you've practiced mindfulness before, whether this is completely new to you, no worries at all. I'll guide us through just a very brief practice. So I'll invite you to, if you feel comfortable doing so, to close your eyes. But if you feel more comfortable, just kind of lowering your gaze away from the screen for a few moments, putting your attention more to your inner world and just tuning into the sound of my voice, guiding you, but also knowing that you're just going to focus on yourself for a few minutes. And to start with, just focusing on your breath and perhaps just taking a few slightly deeper breaths to help you arrive in your body, arrive in this moment, arrive in this event. Just breathing in, feeling the air coming into your body, and then maybe holding for a second and then releasing out. And just doing that a few times, just allowing yourself to just simply focus on breathing. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, but just focusing on your breath. And then from your breath, just kind of widening your attention out a little bit to the rest of your body, just kind of noticing how are you feeling in your body as you arrive in this event. Are you perhaps kind of tired or energized? Are you full of any emotions or sensations, or are you feeling quite open and blank? There's no kind of right or wrong answers here, but just observing what feels true for you in this moment. And then from there, I'm just going to invite you to check in with yourself, whether you have any intention for being in this space, being in this event today. So it might be to learn, it might be to connect, it might be to, simply engage with something new, or maybe you don't know what your intention is, but just kind of sitting with that question just for a moment or two. Do you have an intention that you're arriving with? Again, no right or wrong answer. And seeing if an intention does emerge or is already clear to you, just maybe kind of saying that word or a few words in your mind to yourself. I am here for ... And as we draw to a close of this short practice, just widening your awareness out to the other people that are joining this online event at the same time. So knowing that there are other people joining, connecting through their Zoom accounts, coming perhaps with similar intentions to you to learn, to connect, to share. Whatever your intention may be, there are others here kind of sharing the space with you. So with a few more deep breaths, I'll invite you to slowly open your eyes if your eyes have been closed, or just gently raise your attention back to the screen. Thank you for taking a few moments just to practice together. I always think it's nice when talking about mindfulness to straight away go into a practice. And I'm actually just going to ask to get to know you guys a little bit, and thanks so much for being here today on this event. I'd love to ask Jana to just share a few poll questions that we prepared, just to get a sense of whether you have any experience with mindfulness. And again, there's no right or wrong answers here, so maybe you've got a lot of experience or none at all. Either is totally fine, or somewhere in between. And you'll see there's a second question in this poll. Are you finding it difficult to find space for rest and reflection so far this summer? So we're really going to be focusing on this topic of mindfulness to support rest and reflection. How are you finding that so far? Are you finding it easy, in which case you'd select kind of one or two, or are you finding it actually it's really difficult to, you know that you need to rest and reflect, but you're finding it really difficult to create space or opportunities to do that? So I'll just give a few more seconds for you guys to fill out both those questions, and then Jana can maybe end the poll and we can share the results with you guys, so you can see, we can learn a little bit about each other, and yeah, and who's joining on the event today. So is it okay if we end the poll now, Jana? And then we can share the results. Great, so there we go. In terms of experience with mindfulness, about 64% of you have some experience, and then the next most popular answer is only a very little bit, 29%. And some people are joining with none at all. Brilliant, lovely to have you here. And no one selected lots, so great. We've all got lots to learn together. Even though I've been practicing mindfulness for a long time, I'm definitely still learning. And I really, one of the things I'm going to touch on is that one of the most powerful things can be actually practicing and learning about mindfulness in community, that it's a really beautiful thing to do in connection with others. So great that you're here to do that today. And then in terms of whether you're finding it difficult, the most popular answer there was 4. So a lot of people are finding it quite difficult to create that space for rest and reflection. Again, that's something that we're going to touch on today. I know that it's been a very rapidly changing period with the coronavirus and all of the changing regulations around kind of keeping coronavirus under control, and so many big changes happening in society at the moment that it can feel a bit overwhelming. And I know especially those of us that really try and support others in our communities. I know a lot of people that are involved in Eden Project communities are really active and really trying to support others, which is wonderful. But I've heard from a lot of people that are in that position that, yeah, you know that you need to rest, but it can be really challenging actually to create that time and space to do so. So thank you for sharing about that. And yeah, I see Nancy commenting, yeah, it's about creating opportunities for making yourself do it, and you know that it's hugely beneficial. Yeah, I completely hear that as well. It can be, yeah, that can be challenging. And so today we're going to explore some techniques that have worked for me, some that might work for you guys, and just kind of share and connect together. One challenge that I'm finding, I don't know how, yeah, I'd be really interested actually if you want to comment in the chat, and it's such a British question to bring up, but how are you guys finding the weather? I know that I'm like super hot. I'm actually based in the Netherlands and working for an organisation in the UK, but we're having very similar weather, heat wave at the moment. And I know that that's having a big impact on my ability to rest as well, because I'm just like, it's overwhelmingly hot. So even I feel the need to rest more, but the ability to rest less. So a lot of different factors can affect us, the kind of demands on our time, external circumstances, And yeah, so I guess part of what I'm going to talk about today is not beating yourself up if you are finding it hard to create that time, but just trying to be gentle with yourself and yeah, still find those mindful moments in an accessible way. So Leslie says it's too hot and humid. I totally agree, Leslie. I had a team meeting this morning with the rest of the Network of Wellbeing team, and there's mixed views on adapting to the temperature, but yeah, I definitely find that it's hot and humid. So like I mentioned, I really want everyone to be able to get to know each other well and make this kind of an interactive session. So I'm going to shortly kind of do a presentation and introduce some kind of techniques that might be useful for you guys and guide some more practices. But before we go into all of that, I just wanted to have a chance for you to check in. We've checked in briefly with ourselves in that landing practice, but check in with each other, get to know each other, get to know a bit about, you know, how you're doing today, any experiences you've had with mindfulness, and who else is on the call as well. So we're going to break out into small groups to support you to do that. And I'm just going to pop in the chat a few questions that I'll invite you to share on with each other in the breakout room. So just your name, briefly introducing yourself, if you like, where you're joining from, maybe briefly saying your experience with mindfulness, and also just saying how you're feeling, so how you're arriving in this event. And of course, like respecting your own boundaries, not, you know, don't feel you have to share everything, but also feel free to share as much as you feel comfortable with. And maybe if you can just summarize, feel free to share more in your group, but if you could summarize in one word how you're feeling and arriving, then that would be really helpful, because when we come back from the breakout rooms, maybe we can share those one words just to get a little snapshot from each other's sharings and check-ins. But I'll invite Jana to split us out now into breakout rooms, and we're going to be in those rooms for about 10 minutes just to check in with each other, and then we'll come back and listen to more of a presentation from myself. So yeah, enjoy your breakout room session and see you back here in 10 minutes. Great. Well, lovely. Thanks everyone for taking the time to check in with each other. I always think it's really nice just to get that sense of, you know, in these online events, it can sometimes feel a little impersonal if you're just listening in, but when you get a sense of actually we're here together and we're all kind of arriving with our own emotional states, our own experiences, and just kind of tuning in with that. So just to get a sense of maybe briefly what was shared in the check-in rooms, if you did want to share kind of one word about how, you know, how you're doing right now, how you're arriving in the space, feel free to share that in the chat. If you, I know in my group we were saying it's actually quite hard to summarize the complexity of how we're doing in one word. But Tammy's feeling chilled. That's brilliant, Tammy. Thanks for sharing. But yeah, if you would like to share briefly one word in the chat, you feel free to. And I am going to move on to sharing a presentation now. So for the next kind of 15 minutes or so, I'm going to share a presentation just to give you guys a bit more introduction to some different mindfulness techniques that can maybe hopefully be helpful. So yeah, how to practice mindfulness to support rest and reflection over the summertime. I think the reason that I wanted to frame it in this way is that I know a lot of people, like I mentioned, have been really kind of pushing themselves in the last months to adapt to new circumstances, to deal with rapid change, to try and support others that might be suffering, to try and support yourself in challenging times. And I've noticed from speaking to a lot of different people that actually it's summer and a lot of people are trying to create a bit of space for some more quiet and reflection within still challenging circumstances, you know, school holidays of your parents or work pressures, but knowing that you kind of need that space. So I wanted to just share some kind of accessible techniques to help support you in creating, not like, you know, it's not realistic for everyone to, you know, take weeks out or, you know, but just to kind of create space within your day-to-day life for allowing that rest and reflection. And I also want to really encourage the importance of kind of kindness and community. So like I mentioned, I think it's really helpful to practice and come together and connect with each other. And And often, even just in that check-in space, you know, noticing, you know, different feelings and approaches we have to things can often be shared by others, and that can be so reassuring. So we were sharing that it can be, you know, sometimes, you know, mindfulness is good for you, but it's hard to find the time, and then you can kind of be a bit harsh to yourself about not doing it or beat yourself up. But actually realizing and coming into a group and realizing that's a common experience helps you to just be a bit easier on yourself, a bit kinder to yourself, and feel part of a community as well. So we're just going to touch on some techniques that can help to build that aspect of mindfulness as well. And I just want to encourage us to be kind of informal, get to know each other. So this will be a bit more of a presentation section, but we'll go back into breakout sessions. Sorry about the background noise, that might happen occasionally because I'm close to a street. But we'll go into breakout rooms after the presentation again, so you can chat with each other, and feel free to share kind of questions, reflections in the chat box with each other throughout as well. So to start with, I just wanted to introduce a little bit more about myself and my organisation. So I work with the Network of Wellbeing. So here on the screen, you see a few different pictures from the Network of Wellbeing's work. So at the top, you've got kind of groups of people in-person events, which was, you know, obviously pre-corona, the top right photo. And more recently, we've been running a lot of online events to help support people to build well-being together. So we're really, you know, seeing well-being as something that is important to take care of ourselves, our own kind of mental health, our own physical health, but also that's best done actually often in community, and actually we need conditions in society to help support us do that as well. So we in our events we share different aspects of well-being, kind of personal, social, societal, environmental, and just build community around those sharings and that shared learning. We're actually, usually we hold fortnightly events. We're having a kind of pause in August, but I'll share some details at the end about how you can join future events in September onwards if you'd like to. And as well, we also run kind of community type projects. So the bottom left image shows a kind of beautiful green van, which is actually one of our projects called the Share Shed, which is a mobile library of things. So instead of borrowing books, people borrow things from each other. And this really helps to build a sense of community, and also minimizes the amount of stuff that we have to buy new. So for example, if you need to use a drill to drill up a picture in your house, but you don't need a drill, you just need that hole in the wall, you can borrow a drill from the Share Shed and then, you know, give it back afterwards. So that's a really successful community project that we've been running in Devon. And we've also got a kind of small retreat centre in Devon where we run events and host events around wellbeing, different aspects of wellbeing. So that's just a bit about the Network of Wellbeing's work. Now we're moving on to kind of looking at a definition of mindfulness itself. So I know that most people have had some experience of mindfulness, but just to kind of give an overarching definition of what mindfulness is. This definition is from John Kabat-Zinn, who many of you may have heard of. He's the kind of creator of the mindfulness-based stress reduction 8-week mindfulness program that really kind of helped popularize mindfulness in more kind of Western and medical contexts, actually, to kind of help with pain relief. So he helped bring to the forefront a lot of the research around mindfulness helping with things like pain relief and stress reduction and that kind of thing. So he defines mindfulness as the awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So there's a few different aspects of that definition that I just want to draw attention to, really. There's the paying attention. So like we kind of briefly touched on at the start, the kind of noticing your breathing, noticing how you are in your body, just noticing those aspects of the present moment. And I think often it can be very easy to just go through life on autopilot and not really kind of notice your surroundings, can be very kind of caught up in your thinking mind, which is, you know, your thinking mind is a part of life, and it's not to say that that's wrong, but it can be really helpful to just pay attention consciously to aspects of the here and now. So that's the kind of on purpose aspect of this definition. And the non-judgmentally, I think that's a really important aspect of the kind of kind gentleness with yourself. So not seeing mindfulness as kind of another thing that you have to do or that you should be doing, but more seeing it as an invitation and a tool that could be helpful for you in your life, not and not something that you kind of judge yourself on, so to say, like I'm doing it well or I'm not doing it well, sort of mindset that's easy to get into. I know for myself, I speak from experience. And I just wanted to share a little bit about what mindfulness has been like for me in my kind of journey over the last 7 years or so. For me, this kind of aspect of building mindfulness in community has been really core to me. So this is, you'll see me in the background there with my little daughter Lily. I'm actually sitting in a kind of mindfulness circle. This was just last weekend. I went away with some friends that I've met through practicing mindfulness on a kind of socially distanced camping trip. And I just really found it so valuable just to be practicing together with others again. And I think whatever that looks like, and it doesn't always look like this, it sometimes looks like an online meeting like this, or it looks like just being with one person and encouraging each other. But I think whatever community means to you, it can be really valuable to bring that aspect into practicing mindfulness and to kind of help support you in kind of continuing a practice. And I also would say, like, making space for mindfulness in everyday life. So like I mentioned, I do have a young daughter, so my daily life is often quite messy, and I'm trying to balance work and parenting and different, pressures and responsibilities on my time. And I still find that within the mess, I think it's so valuable to kind of carve out even short moments of practice. And it doesn't always look like sitting in mindfulness meditation. So in this image, I'm sitting in a mindfulness meditation amongst the mess of my daughter's toys. But it doesn't always need to look like sitting. It could just be whilst you're making a cup of tea or a cold drink in this weather, taking a few kind of conscious mindfulness breaths and just checking in with yourself. So I think those two aspects, kind of having a sense of community, whatever that looks like for you, and seeing mindfulness as something that can be practiced in your day-to-day life rather than something that's completely separate, can really help to sustain like a more regular practice, rather than seeing it as something to kind of put pressure on yourself to do, just kind of integrating it in small ways. So I know that a lot of people maybe feel like they need rest and reflection because they're kind of responding to this sense of stress and overwhelm that can come up, I know, often for people at the moment with rapidly changing circumstances. So I just wanted to introduce a few very short techniques that work for me in terms of bringing the mindfulness into the everyday. So maybe you can kind of listen to these and try them out in your own circumstances. One very simple one is just counting your breaths. So simply like breathing in for 1 and breathing out for 2. And I often just use that technique and count up to 10. Or if you want to take a few very deep breaths and like count up to 4 or 5 on the in breath and then again on the out breath. But whatever counting kind of makes sense for you. There's no like formula for it, but just it for me, it can help me to just kind of tune into my breath, tune into the moment in a very simple, accessible way. Another kind of day-to-day tip is mindful eating and drinking. So I think it can be so easy when you're busy to kind of rush through eating and drinking as something you just have to do to kind of fuel you to get through to the next step of the day. But actually it can be really helpful to just take, even if it's just like a minute or two to drink, to have a drink and kind of really notice the, the feel of the drink, the taste of the drink, the, being with yourself in that moment. It sounds maybe strange if you're not used to doing that kind of thing, but it can be really helpful just to kind of consciously carve out those moments when you're eating or drinking to just be a little bit more conscious in yourself. I also would say mindful movement can be really helpful. So even something as simple as kind of rolling your shoulders if you're sitting at your desk quite often can be really, really helpful just to kind of, like I say, I'm a real fan of kind of small moments, because I think that I've heard, and I know for myself, it can kind of put people off when they think, yeah, okay, mindfulness is great and there's a lot of research behind its benefits, but I don't have time to sit for 20 minutes in the morning. But actually, you can invite a mindful way of being into your day-to-day life just by bringing these few small kind of mindful moments, mindful intentional practices into your day-to-day activities. I would say, of course, sitting in meditation does definitely help to strengthen that, but it's not to say that you have to have a certain amount of time available to start being more mindful and using that as a kind of support for your rest and reflection. So yeah, if you would like to share what helps you, it's a little bit tricky for me whilst I'm sharing my screen to look at what's going on in the chat box, but I will definitely check in after I've shared. But yeah, feel free to share with each other, you know, what helps you. Do you have small practices during the day that help you just create a small moment of a mini, let's say a mini mindful moment of calm for yourself? Because these are just a few that help me, but I'm sure that there's many others. And if you don't have others, maybe just commenting like, do any of these really resonate with you? Have you tried any before? Have they helped you or not? So whilst you're kind of sharing on that, I will move on to the next slide, which is actually inviting us to just briefly practice what we preach. So if you're kind of sharing in the chat, I'll invite you to just take a brief pause from that and just to take 3 deep breaths together. And feel free, I'll guide this, but feel free to do it at your own pace if it feels more comfortable or makes more sense. But just gently turning your attention inwards, but just very briefly, and just breathing deeply in and just filling your lungs, and then maybe holding your breath for a second, and then just feeling the release of breathing out, and then just doing that 2 more times together. So breathing in and then holding and releasing out, and then once more breathing deeply in and then releasing and trying to let everything go on the out. So again, just coming back to the screen and just noticing, even having those few conscious breaths, does that make any impact on your body? I know for me, I straight away feel a little bit more calm, a little bit more present, a little bit less warm, interestingly. So yeah, I think it just helps to support your body to kind of self-regulate as well. So there are a few kind of accessible day-to-day tips that I've shared. I'm going to share a few specific approaches that are kind of backed by research about more this aspect of being kind to yourself in your mindfulness practice. So one is this practice of self-compassion, which some of you may have heard of and some not. It's from a researcher in the US called Kristin Neff, who has shared a lot on the importance of being compassionate and kind towards ourselves, and this being kind of a key part of the way that we can kind of take care of ourselves in the world, actually. So she talks about mindfulness being one aspect of practicing self-compassion, and that this is a practice that you can particularly use when you're experiencing something challenging in your life. So when a challenge arises, it can be helpful to take this 3-step process. And the first step is being mindful. And mindfulness can help us, yes, to kind of have a moment of calm and reflection, but it can also help us to just be present for what is true in this moment. And that might not also always be calm or easy or positive, and that's okay. I think it's really important to be mindful of the diversity of experiences and emotions that we face in this life. So the first step of practicing self-compassion is just to be mindful with what is. So for example, Kristin Neff uses the example of experiencing a challenging moment with her son, and she notices that moment is happening, that actually this is really hard. My son is behaving badly in a public place, and I'm struggling with that. And just being mindful with the fact that she's struggling, she's feeling angry, she's feeling upset, she doesn't quite know how to move forward or respond. And then from that place of mindfulness, mindfully acknowledging, breathing into what's happening in the present moment, the step 2 is acknowledging your common humanity in that. So knowing that, yes, you might be struggling in that moment, but many people struggle, of course, with parenting being the example in Kristen Neff's case in that moment. That's a common experience and emotion. It's not wrong of you to be struggling, that you're not alone in your struggle, and that a lot of people may be experiencing something similar. And actually, there can be something so reassuring about knowing that we're not alone in our struggles. I know, a lot of people at the moment are facing many challenges in response to Corona, from kind of, I say, simple things like, for example, I'm finding it hard that I haven't been able to see my family face to face for a really long time because we don't live in the same country, to, much more challenging things like losing your job or losing loved ones. These are really challenging, difficult things, but in kind of acknowledging, making space to be mindful of what you're going through and feeling that sense of common humanity in it can be very helpful. But the third step that we'll move on to now is key, and that's self-kindness. So acknowledging your challenge and knowing you're not alone in it will take you so far, but it's really important to try and cultivate that sense of kindness and compassion for yourself. So Kristen Neff says, like it says in this image of a teapot on the screen, treat yourself as you would treat a good friend. So I think often our inner dialogue can be quite self-critical, and if we kind of take that pause of mindfulness, we can kind of tune in with that and realize, actually, maybe you're being a little bit too harsh on yourself. And if your good friend was going through a similar experience, how would you react to him or her? How would you kind of talk and respond to them in that circumstance? And just trying, I know this is difficult, but just trying, even if you can, in a small way, try and bring that same sense of kindness to yourself, it's actually a really valuable practice. So yeah, Kristen Neff, I'd really recommend. She's got a TED talk if anyone wants to find out more about, and a website, Self-Compassion, which I'll share with Jana and the Eden team to include in the follow-up email from this webinar. But I'd really recommend checking out her work if you haven't come across it already. And here I've just included a few examples of how your inner critic or your inner kind of self-compassionate voice can respond differently to challenging circumstances. So there's 3 examples here, but I'll just read one. The middle one says, you make a mistake, your kind of inner critic can immediately respond quite harshly, and this happens to most, if not all of us, kind of saying, what's wrong with you? Why have you done that? How could you have done that? But actually, if you take time to go through this process of kind of mindfulness, knowing you're not alone and being a bit kinder to yourself, cultivating that compassion, you can say, okay, I made a mistake. That's actually quite human. Everyone makes mistakes, but what did I learn from this mistake? So that's just a few examples of how taking this approach can help to kind of, in a way, it's a training, train your inner voice and, to respond more compassionately to yourself. And this I'm sharing on the slide now is another technique that comes from another kind of very experienced mindfulness teacher, Tara Brach, that's RAIN. So it's an acronym that kind of offers, again, a step-by-step process to go through if you're experiencing a challenge. And it's a mindful approach. And I'm hoping that sharing these techniques with you, when you rest and reflection kind of comes from not by pushing challenges away, but by kind of being with them and allowing yourself space for them, really. I think often we try and see rest or even mindfulness as something that looks very kind of calm and with no distractions, but it's quite challenging to get those moments in day-to-day life. So these techniques are kind of meeting yourself where you're at, knowing that you have challenges and knowing how to compassionately, mindfully deal with those challenges that arise. So this RAIN acronym, the R is for recognize what is happening now. So in a way, this is quite similar in some ways to the self-compassion. Tara Brach calls this approach radical self-compassion. So it's kind of recognizing what is happening. So what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I sensing? Kind of just naming that for yourself. And then the A is allowing that. So rather than, I think when we experience challenge, of course, our natural response can often be to try to immediately fix or, you know, run away from what it is that is challenging us. Of course, that makes sense, but I think that often in the resisting, especially when it's an emotional reaction, we can inadvertently kind of strengthen that reaction. And in allowing, accepting what's going on, somewhat counterintuitively, it can allow us to move through that emotional state. So kind of just accepting, acknowledging, understanding, yes, I'm going through something that's a bit challenging right now. This is what's happening. And then the I of the RAIN process is investigating, but with a kind of gentle, curious attention. So not kind of with our kind of really like critical thinking mind, let's say, but just kind of with a gentle, trying to cultivate that kind of gentle approach. Okay, what am I thinking, feeling? How can I allow it? And what is it actually? What's underneath that feeling? Where is that coming from? And often just kind of sitting with it and investigating gently can kind of uncover things that you might not have expected. And then the N process, step of RAIN, the RAIN process is nurture. So again, you'll see parallels with the self-compassion from Kristin Neff. Nurture is in a way similar to that self-kindness, kind of bringing loving presence and self-care. So two similar approaches to just meeting yourself where you're at and mindfully dealing with challenges you might have in life, basically. So I'm going to draw to a close of this presentation by just leaving with two kind of key points. One is, again, kind of coming back to what I started with on the importance of connection, community, connecting with each other. I think often we can imagine that mindfulness is a solo practice, which it can be, but it's also helpful to talk about it with others, to practice it with others. So if there are ways, and you're already doing it through coming to this event, which is great, yeah, just connecting with others and kind of supporting yourself in that way. And also kindness, so finding ways to really nurture that sense of kindness to yourself. And like was said in the description of this event, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I know that many on this call are very caring towards others in your lives, in your personal lives, in your communities, and that's a really beautiful thing to nurture. But it's also really important to know that you can't kind of just keep giving and giving and giving, otherwise it will be unsustainable and you'll burn out. So actually it's really important to try and find these ways to also support ourselves so that we can more effectively give to others as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen there and come back to the main group. And we're going to go into breakout rooms shortly again, but I just wanted to give an opportunity. I know you guys have been sharing a little bit in the chat, but if you have any other comments or questions you'd like to share, then do feel free to do so briefly in the chat now. I see, Vicky, you shared some things that have helped you in terms of getting those mindful moments in your life. So being in nature, walking, swimming, gardening. Yeah, I think those are so important, definitely. And thank you for mentioning that, Vicky. I think just being outside can be such a mind shift. And there's actually a lot of research to support this as well. I mean, it's something natural that you feel intuitively, but being in green spaces can really support our kind of nervous system to calm down, for sure. So thanks for that, Vicky. And Lara says, yeah, tending to my plants. So yeah, similar in a way, like, you know, being inside, but connecting to nature through, yeah, that gentle tending of your plants. That's also a really lovely one, Lara. Thanks for sharing. And Lisa says she definitely agree that it's a roller coaster and getting outside. Brilliant, a very outdoors group. I love it. I think it's so important. Feeling the grass under your feet. So true, Lara. No worries that you have to drop off, Lara. Thanks for joining. So I'm going to just guide another short practice, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms again. So I just wanted to offer a chance for us to put into practice some of those techniques that we just heard about in terms of meeting challenging experiences. So it's just going to be, again, a brief practice, but a little bit longer than the landing one of maybe 4 or 5 minutes. So I'll just invite you to, again, just kind of allow yourself to get into a comfortable position. Yeah, no worries, Tammy, thanks for joining us. And again, like earlier, just kind of, if you would like to close your eyes, if you feel comfortable doing so, then doing so. And if not, just kind of lowering your gaze. And yeah, if you've had your video on, wonderful, you can feel free to leave it on or turn it off during this section. Yeah, so starting off with, once you're in that comfortable position with your eyes closed or your gaze lowered, just again, tuning into your breathing, just really focusing on your in breath and your out breath. And just allowing that kind of to settle you a little bit, just noticing how your thoughts and feelings are after having listened to a presentation for a little bit. And just being with your breath and with your body. And then I'm going to invite you to draw to mind a challenge that you might have experienced recently. And I'll advise that it's not, maybe not your most serious challenge that you're facing in your life right now. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is a small challenge and 10 is a huge one that seems insurmountable, maybe just kind of a 4 or a 5, just a challenge that's been bothering you, that's come back to you a few times. Just kind of taking a few moments. Maybe something comes to mind straight away, or maybe you're still searching for something. Doesn't need to be perfect, it's just giving you something to practice with. So drawing to mind that challenge. And then again, just tuning back into your breath. If you notice your thoughts kind of drifting over what's the best challenge, or is this good enough? Just knowing your breath is always there to support you in this practice. And just seeing if you can settle on, okay, this is the challenge that I'm going to practice with today. It doesn't need to be perfect. And then we're just going to go through those steps of the RAIN process. So just kind of recognizing this challenge, just kind of taking a moment to look at it. So what thoughts come up around this challenge? What feelings can you see, feel, sense in your body? What's emerging for you? And trying not to bring any judgment to your thoughts or feelings, but just kind of, again, just like that gentleness, just recognizing what's coming up for you in relation to this challenge. And from that point of recognition, moving towards the A of the RAIN process, just seeing if you can allow and accept those thoughts, those feelings that are coming up in relation to that challenge that you've been experiencing. Just seeing if you can, you might even want to say, it's okay, or just repeat a simple kind of supportive phrase to yourself, just to help you accept that challenging experience. Sometimes it can help to kind of gently put your hand on your heart, just as a sign to yourself that it's okay, that you're allowing, you know that that's challenging, you've recognized it, but you're allowing it to be there. And then from that allowing, that place of acceptance, moving towards kind of gently investigating. Maybe what's behind that challenge for you? What's really kind of going on for you in relation to that? Does it help you in this moment to stop and be with it, or are you actually finding that more challenging? Just kind of investigating your own responses, seeing if you can kind of take a bit of an observer point of view on yourself. So rather than getting too caught up in the stories, just taking a step back and investigating what really is it that's happening there. And if something comes up, just, making a note of that. And if nothing comes up, that's also totally okay. Knowing that this is just a process, it's just a practice. It's to help support you. And then we'll move towards the last step of this RAIN process, which is nurture. So really just bringing that intention of self-kindness, of kind of knowing that you're doing the best that you can in relation to this challenge, that, you're not alone in having these kind of challenges, that you are loved and that you can be gentle and kind to yourself. I'm just trying to really breathe into those words and those feelings, that you're doing your best, you are good enough. Okay. And with a few more breaths, we're going to tune back into our bodies and into the environment around us and slowly prepare to come back together to our collective space. So if your eyes have been closed, inviting you to open your eyes. And if it feels comfortable, you can always just have a little stretch after you've been sitting still for a little minute. Just again, kind of extending that sense of kindness to yourself. So wonderful. Thanks so much for taking the time to try that out, especially if it's a new practice for you.